Mr. Mayor, we're live.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. I'd like to welcome everybody to the council meeting for February 26, 2025. Before we start the meeting, I just want to, and read the land acknowledgement, I just want to ask everybody in chamber to please turn your cell phones off. And whenever anyone comes to the podium to speak during open forum or any presentations, could you adjust the mic so you're speaking directly into the end of the mic as this meeting is being live streamed and so people can hear you that are viewing from home. The Township of Oro-Medonte acknowledges that we are situated on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people and ancestral territory of the Huron-Wendat. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. It continues today as the home for diverse Indigenous people, including the historic Métis community in Penetangwishim. The Anishinaabe people continue to have an enduring relationship with this land, specifically the Chippewas of Rama First Nation, the Chippewa Tri-Council, and the Williams Treaties First Nations. The Huron-Wendat Nation also continues to pay respect and protect their ancestors and heritage on this land. We honor the Indigenous history and culture that has thrived for millennia in this territory and the treaties that bind us together as partners in the spirit of a shared, sustainable, and prosperous future. We are all treaty people. Our commitment begins with acknowledging the truth so that we can move forward towards reconciliation. Miigwech. Madam Clerk, may we have a draft motion to adopt the agenda, please?
Moved by Clark, seconded by Shell. Be it resolved that the agenda for the council meeting of Wednesday, February 26, 2025 be received and adopted.
Okay. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. May we have a motion to go past 4 hours, please, Madam Clerk, if necessary?
Moved by Hutchison, seconded by Young. Be it resolved that Rule 14.20A, as per the procedural bylaw number 2023-043, be suspended in order to allow the meeting to proceed past the 4-hour adjournment requirement if necessary.
Okay. Can we have the door opened, please? Just because we're in open session. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've heard the motion. I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried. And is there any members of council that have a pecuniary interest to, Councillor Schell?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Item 11D, 11B on the short-term rental accommodations licensing bylaw. I wish to stand down from that as I own and operate a short-term rental.
Thank you very much, Councillor Schell. Any other members of council at this time? If you find you're in a situation where you're in a pecuniary interest or a conflict of interest of any of the items, please take time to declare at that time. We have no closed session items. May we have a draft motion for the 2 sets of minutes, Madam Clerk?
Moved by Young, seconded by Clark. Be it resolved that the draft minutes of the special council meeting held on Thursday, February 6th, 2025, minutes of the council meeting held on Wednesday, February 12th, 2025, be received and adopted as printed and circulated.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Schell, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I have business arising from 5B of the February 12th council meeting, and I'm asking council to waive reconsideration procedures related to motion number C250212-7. I've prepared 5 relatively brief points to enable council to determine whether to grant my reconsideration request.
Okay. I think, I'm not sure if, well, I don't believe this can be inserted at this point, but I will refer to the clerk for clarity.
Reconsideration would have to be from a member who has voted on the affirmative side.
Correct.
So a mover and a seconder would be required for reconsideration. And any item that is being reconsidered cannot be already actioned. We would have to determine The motion has been sent for sure for action. Whether it has been actioned or not at this point in time, I can't confirm. But
Okay. So,
procedurally, that is the only way that it can go on.
okay. So I just want to, this is on item B, correct?
That is correct.
And the item that you want us to, it is, which item was it? Within that?
Yes, that's correct.
No, but what item on that agenda do you know in part B?
It's the entire process of how council came up with their conclusion.
Okay, well, that I think the only, I don't think I'm not comfortable that we do it this way. I would suggest you would go back. This is about the IC reports, correct? Is it to do with the IC reports that came in?
Not entirely. I just would like to say that from the code of conduct, it gives me the right to address the recommendations in the report if considered by council.
Yeah, that
And
would,
it does not say that it has to have a time to be considered at the time that was made, because I didn't respond or talk at that time.
yeah, but that, and I can appreciate that, but I know we've been down this road before, and the time for any rebuttal or comment back for clarification has to be during that time. And unfortunately, we do not have the IC in the meeting, and those questions of clarity need to be clarified at that time while the IC is here.
Okay.
So it doesn't fit for us to do what you're proposing at this time. So I would refer you to either have further communication with the clerk or directly with the IC on how it comes back. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Mr. Mayor, for clarification, I have already addressed this matter with the councillor. So those items and the items for clarification have been addressed.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Okay, so we've heard the motions. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, so we have no recognitions of achievements on the agenda this week or public meetings, and no deputations. Is there any items on the agenda that need to be moved up from any members of the public? Seeing none?
My apologies, Mr. Mayor.
No. I just that there is no items that need to be moved up. So we are now into the open forum section of our meeting. And Madam Clerk, do we have any people registered in open forum?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. We have, for open forum, we have Jane Voorhees, and she is in person for matter 13B.
And may I just, for some clarity, Madam Clerk, how many people do we have registered for open forum?
Just one. The other items are people presenting or here to answer questions. Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to ask, and if council will approve that open forum can go beyond the 2-minute limit. I do ask the presenters that do present an open forum, try to stay to it as best as possible, but I want to give a little bit of leniency so that people from the public can voice their concerns and their issues. Okay, so can I get an agreement of, and we need 2/3. Is everyone in favor of that? Okay, no, fair enough. So Madam Clerk, if we can call, the first person is Jane Voorhees.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor.
Ms. Voorhees, if you'd like to come to the mic and adjust it so that you're speaking directly into it. and welcome to the chamber, and it's good to see you back. That's a positive.
That's a good thing.
And if you want to continue or start whenever you're ready, please.
Absolutely. Great. Thank you very much, Jane Voorhees, member Friends of the Future. Thank you very much for extending the 2 minutes. Obviously, I talk a lot. First of all, before I get to what I'm talking about, I'd just like to thank everyone here, the council members, our staff, for your unwavering dedication to the annexation issue. I know that you spend countless hours outside of work, emails, texting, meetings, looking over reports, in an all effort to help the community. And as residents, we do sincerely appreciate your time. As a member of the community group Friends of the Future, we support Motion 13B because it addresses critical flaws in the proposed annexation negotiations that undermine transparency and fairness. We agree with Motion B that if any future negotiations occur, they must be open to public input, driven by clear timelines, full municipality attendance, and grounded in factual evidence, not by unverified assertions of needing more land by the City of Barrie. Over the past year, despite this township's excellent efforts to keep the community informed as much as they are allowed to through the township's dedicated webpage, it has become increasingly evident to our group and to the citizens of Oro-Medonte that current facilitation negotiations have stopped the residents of Oro-Medonte from understanding and contributing to discussions on this matter. So without public input, we, the taxpayers, cannot observe if there's any external pressures or political influence in these negotiations, and that our voices and perspectives are not heard. We believe and applaud Motion 13 in its attempts to address these concerns and to try to restore transparency through these negotiations. That being said, I believe it's crucial at this time to reflect on past events so that we can gain some current perspective before making any decisions regarding whether to continue with Hempson and further facilitation negotiations. So, as you remember, and I've pointed out many times, more than a year ago, the residents of Oro-Medonte, along with Barrie Ward 1 community members, united to fight the City of Barrie's attempt to annex our land for industrial development. In just 1 week, we gathered over 3,000 signatures demonstrating our collective opposition. We resisted, as did all of you in your presentation, in particular Mr. Lavoie and Mr. Greenlaw, to Minister Calandra, because we all knew that this land was not suitable for employment purposes. The Hempson report confirmed this stance. Barrie has enough employment land to last until 2051, and our land was never and is not a viable option for industrial development. This should have been the end of the issue, and we really should not be continuing with this discussion today. In fact, part of me questions our continued involvement, given our stance was proven correct. But now, Oro-Medonte taxpayers have unfairly shouldered over $20,000 in costs for provincial facilitation and land needs assessment. I ask you, I ask our residents, why should our township bear the financial burden of an annexation attempt by the City of Barrie that was based on an unfounded premise right at the beginning? I, as a member of the group of Friends of the Future, firmly believe that Barrie should be compensating Oro-Medonte for the costs incurred for this unjustified land grab and should have never involved us in negotiations that in hindsight proved totally unnecessary. We need to stand up to this unfairness. To make matters worse, Motion B highlights that current facilitation negotiations have been plagued by excessive and questionable spending, already 60% over budget. I don't even know how this is possible. It just sounds crazy to me. Did they demonstrate any justification for this substantial increase? Oro-Medonte taxpayers should not be forced to fund another stage in this facilitation process that lacks clear direction, a defined timeline, or meaningful consensus by all municipalities participating in these negotiations. And most important, if the parties, namely the City of Barrie, cannot even agree on basic planning assumptions and clear facts presented in the Hempson report, how can we trust that this next stage will deliver responsible and beneficial outcomes for our community? And sadly, rather than providing closure through the Hempson report, our community finds ourselves confronted with a new, shifting justification. The City of Barrie has now switched its reasons for annexation from industrial development to housing, and the push for additional land outside of the agreed facilitation process. This forces us yet into another reactionary position. Rather than acknowledging the clear evidence that disproves their original argument, Barrie has simply changed the narrative. This ongoing pivot raises serious concerns in my mind. If the City of Barrie was wrong in the past, how can we be confident and trust that they are right now? More importantly, why should we as a community continually bear the burden of responding to their changing justifications at our own expense? I believe it's time to stop wasteful spending and the never-ending time commitment to this issue by you, council members, and our staff. We are entitled to negotiations that put our community interests first, rather than being subject to continually justifying or continually shifting justifications. In closing, the critical question I believe we all need to ask ourselves is this: will we allow our history with the proposed annexation negotiations to repeat itself under a different pretense? Or will we demand future negotiations based on facts, transparency, and genuine need, rather than shifting justifications and political maneuvering? I believe that Motion B is vital for ensuring that we engage in we choose to engage in future negotiations. We need to prioritize accountability, allow for public input, and uphold financial fairness. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Voorhees.
And my file is getting really big, guys.
Does any members of council have questions for Ms. Voorhees this time? I want to thank you for all your engagement with the community and keeping us informed with the community's opinions and the direction they would like to see council continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'm also interested to hear your negotiation or your discussion around 13B this afternoon.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, does anybody else in the gallery would like to speak to any other matters on the agenda today? Mr. Crawford, please come forward and welcome to the chamber, and please continue when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The agenda item I would like to speak about is consent agenda item 14D in regards to the Citizen of the Year nominations. I completely understand these two awards are at arm's length to council, and all nominations are submitted by residents. A committee of all past recipients choose the citizen and the senior of the year from the submitted nominations. To my knowledge, it has been done this way since before amalgamation of Oro and Medonte. I personally believe it is time to investigate and possibly update the process and the way the citizen and the senior of the year are chosen. My request to council is to consider directing staff to gather information on how other communities approach these awards. I would like to see a process that is more equitable, involving all areas of Oro-Medonte in choosing these awards. Thank you for allowing me my input.
Thank you very much, Mr. Crawford. Any members of council have any questions for Mr. Crawford at this time? Councillor Hutchison?
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. More a comment and then a question, if you don't mind. And thank you. We had a chat about this last night, and yes, I fully agree with what you're recommending we have a look at doing. And I would also love any input that you may have yourself, Mr. Crawford, to help in the process of seeing how we could redefine the awards and how they're chosen. So I thank you very much for bringing this forward. I think it's due time, clearly, to review the process and see if we can tighten it up somehow. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
And did you want me to answer whether I'll help or not?
No, I'll leave that to you to get back to me, unless you want to do it publicly.
No, thank you so much.
No. Any other questions at this time? Thank you very much, Mr. Crawford, because I think this is important. These are two very distinguished and important awards to this township in order to recognize people that have gone way above and beyond over a long period of time, it usually seems. So I think, you know, as we've evolved from a small rural municipality to quite a larger operating machine, I think it only makes sense that we maybe revisit that in order to see if we can get something that is more fully encompassing of the entire municipality and does a more thorough dive into those individuals that are being recognized. So thank you for your time. Madam Clerk, would you like to step to the mic and give a, yeah.
Mr. Mayor, before you move on to the next item, I just have a little housekeeping with respect to approval of the agenda. We did miss an addendum to the agenda to add as item 13B. Mm-hmm. Deputy Mayor Lavoie, a motion regarding the Barrie boundary adjustment provincial facilitation. So if we could just...
Do you want to revote or you just want to do a friendly amendment to the...
No, if we could please have a vote on that.
Okay, so I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? There are none. That is carried.
Thank you for your indulgence, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, no, thank you. Okay, so now we're at reports of municipal officers for action. Number 11. Mr. Van Vonnecourt, would you like to provide a summary of the comments for item 11A? And I understand Jay Beach from Georgian Communities will be presenting the slide deck.
Thank you, Worship. Good afternoon, members of council. Yes, we're joined this afternoon by Jay Beach of Georgian Communities, and he's going to speak a little bit later with a presentation, including a PowerPoint slide deck. So I'll kick it off, Your Worship. So in your package is a report dealing with the federal government Canada Housing Infrastructure Grant Program. And in early November, the Federal Minister of Housing and Infrastructure and Communities announced the launch of this program and allocated $1 billion in direct funding to help communities build or improve infrastructure, such as drinking water, wastewater, stormwater to help build more homes. The deadline for applications is March 31st, 2025. And in response to the announced funding program, staff initiated meetings with 2 Oro-Medonte developers that were in a state of readiness and general alignment to take advantage of this program. The Georgian Communities Development Team reviewed the grant criteria and are of the view that the infrastructure required to service the development of 500 housing units in the Craighurst community could be eligible for the grant and therefore expedite housing construction. The Craighurst Crossing development consists of 361 single-family dwelling units on the north side of Horseshoe Valley Road and east of Penetang Machine Road. Construction is intended to proceed in 4 phases, with Phase 1A currently underway. The development is to be serviced by municipally owned and operated communal drinking water and communal wastewater systems. Georgian Communities is also proposing a mixed-use development on the south side of Horseshoe Valley Road consisting of 5,100 square meters of commercial space, or 55,000 square feet, and 150 low-rise apartment-style units. A pre-consultation meeting has been held on these lands, and applications for official plan amendment, zoning amendment, plan of subdivision, and site plan applications are to be submitted shortly. Georgian Communities has advised staff that they have engaged outside engineering and legal expertise to assist them with the various components of the application, and with the township's support are preparing to submit for the March 31st, 2025 deadline. The Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund is a merit-based contribution funding program. The selection of projects is based on eligibility criteria and the achievement of a minimum merit score, as well as the availability of funding. Applications can be submitted by municipal governments, public sector bodies, non-for-profits, and private sector for-profit bodies. Any of these entities need to be working in partnership. Applicants need to clearly demonstrate how their proposed projects will support more homes by expanding or improving critical infrastructure. Georgian Communities consultants have looked at the infrastructure required to develop Craighurst Crossing and are assisting with the preparation of the application. Georgian Communities will be applying for $12 million to $20 million in funding to construct wastewater infrastructure to support the development of over 500 units in the Craighurst settlement area. Components include 4 sanitary sewer beds, sewer pipes, pumping stations, storm sewers, and stormwater management ponds. Bringing housing to Oro-Medonte, especially mid-rise apartment-style housing that tends to be more affordable than single-family housing, is part of Council's goal of developing complete communities. For a private entity to apply, it must work in collaboration with an eligible public sector entity such as a municipality. Township staff have been working with Georgian Communities on a variety of development applications and recognize the value of a partnership to facilitate and expedite the development of a variety of housing types in Oro-Medonte. The application guide states that where multiple eligible applicants are working together, one lead applicant must be identified. The lead applicant will enter into an agreement with Housing Infrastructure and Community Canada and be responsible for the implementation of the project. Staff are recommending that the Township of Oro-Medonte be the lead applicant. The reason being that if Georgian Communities is the lead applicant, the maximum federal share that the Canada Housing Infrastructure Program may contribute is up to 25% of total eligible costs. If the township is the lead applicant, up to 50% of total eligible expenditures would be covered. So in addition to that, the rationale is that the infrastructure proposed to be constructed will eventually be owned by the municipality when the subdivisions and projects outlined previously are complete. Georgian Communities is a proven developer that is engaged in the municipality, and finally, staff have the expertise to administer this grant program. In conclusion, township staff view the grant program as an excellent opportunity to leverage public sector dollars with private sector investment to build infrastructure that will support the creation of housing in Craighurst, further meeting council's goals as outlined in its official plan and strategic plan. And now, Your Worship, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Beach, and he has a brief presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Van Boncourt, and Mr. Beach, welcome to the chamber, and please, yeah, you have to adjust it. You're a little bit taller than the previous, and please, whenever you're ready, proceed.
Excellent. Good afternoon, Your Worship, members of council and staff. My name is Jay Beach, Vice President of Georgian Communities, and would like to take this opportunity to provide a quick status update to the Village of Craighurst as it stands today. Phase 1A that we currently have a subdivision agreement with the municipalities, Township of Oro-Medonte in this case. Phase 1A is 52 of 58 sold homes, with 13 homes currently under construction in this turbulent market. Phase 1B sales launch consisting of 64 homes has been completed, and our sales team is actively closing deals daily. Our engineering team is currently advancing Phase 2A and 2B that front onto the Horseshoe Valley Road to start the remaining site prep and earthworks in the spring. Our intention would be to advance our pre-servicing in Q4 2025 to get ready for a hot market and new sales launch of those lots and new phases. So we'll be entering into a subdivision agreement this time next year in anticipation to catch a hot market, we hope. Overall, the Village of Craighurst has been extremely successful, and we're really proud to be here today. Next slide, please. As mentioned in George's excellent staff summary report, in November 2024, we were met with the senior development team. Most of you are here today. Through our network and due diligence, we were able to acquire the services of Stantec's North American Funding Program Department, okay, to review the probability of success for the CHIF grant. They quickly reviewed our file. We work closely with them. It's a specialized group out of Vancouver and with assistance from Winnipeg as well. Ultimately, they proven through their due diligence that we were a prime candidate for this grant. We quickly executed a proposal, committed to those costs, and started the process. The deadline for this is March 31st, 2025. It's been an active couple months to get to this point today. I'm meeting with this team daily, as with George's group as well, to get this going and to hit the send button on March 31st through an online application process. We are meeting those deadlines. Thankfully, most of the work and heavy lifting has been done through our approval process to get us to the date for building permits to date. So we are taking advantage of the due diligence and the work that's been done today with the MVCA, the County of Simcoe, and the Township of Oro-Medonte, meeting climate obligations and approvals to that process. Flood mitigation, regional stormwater management practices, water, wastewater. A lot of those things are exceeding expectations as per the merit chart, so we're pretty excited about that. The project overview, if you don't mind going back to the next chart here, it's in small writing, so I'm going to read off the screen here. We are going through the cost estimate, a $12 to $20 million funding to construct wastewater, water, stormwater management infrastructure to support the Craighurst development. What you see on the screen here is what we feel comfortable sharing today. Phase 1 ultimately is on the east limits that go through, now known as Private McKay Drive. The balance of the subdivision, and what I'll aim to you is the Craighurst South development. We currently own that, and we'll share some further visuals around that. But it all speaks together. We've designed the wastewater, water, and stormwater to capture that development through the existing infrastructure we have. We have been working with our consultant team at Stantec and Tatham to ultimately size appropriately and create pumping stations in design format now to take on this whole development. There will be different stages as we approach different land acquisitions in the settlement area, but for now, we can only apply for what we know. So just to give a little context in that regard. Components of the project, which will be included in the cost estimate and valued for the application itself, will be 4 sanitary beds, sanitary sewer lines, catch basins, stormwater management ponds, pumping stations, sanitary treatment plants, storm sewers, water main manholes, and linear infrastructure pipes. All of which I can say with confidence will be conveyed to the municipality once we are done and assumed as per our subdivision agreement. So again, another Township of Oro asset. Sorry, next slide. The Canadian Infrastructure and Communities Canada, Canadian Housing Infrastructure Fund, I should say, the CHIF, as we're referring to it. The proposed project for Georgian communities best falls under the direct delivery stream. The stream is meant to support pressing infrastructure needs in communities to increase housing development. That's the real purpose of this application. Projects under the direct development stream must be between $1 million and $100 million to total eligible costs. The maximum contribution on the recipient type up to 25% of eligible costs for the private sector, Georgian Communities, Craighurst Limited Partnership, if we were to do it on our own, up to 50% of total eligible costs with a partnership with the municipality, regional governments with a population of 30,000 and under. So we had to read this application very, very, very detailed to figure out if we fell under these. We had a lawyer's opinion, Jim McIntosh. We've had the funding team look at it, and we seem to be checking off the boxes more and more every day. So we're pretty excited to get to this point. To be eligible to receive the funding, the municipal and regional governments in the provinces must adopt 2 conditions under the program. Adopt a zoning for 4 units as of right per lot in all low-density areas with a municipal servicing water and sewer in the communities for populations greater than 30,000. So it's a growth method. I think that's Bill 23 and some other legislation that's gone through that we've talked to with planning staff, and we hope to supply a wastewater system that could do that. Water does not seem to be the issue. Wastewater does. With acquisitions of land in the settlement boundary, we feel we can achieve that, although some heavy lifting needs to be done. It's a stage-by-stage process. The other second item would be to implement a 3-year freeze in increasing development charges above the rates that were in effect as of April 2nd, 2024. In municipalities and regional governments where populations are greater than 300,000. So again, not really my side of the business. We pay them. We don't dictate the background studies. However, I believe we meet those requirements on preliminary due diligence. Next slide, please. Application elements. So what I'm learning from the process is it's an online application that has approximately 65 to 75 questions that will need to be answered on the online format. Mostly yes and no questions, long answers, short responses, multiple choice. That's why we're paying a consultant team to do this for us. We'll be represented properly in that regard. Application components being the next slide on the screen, as I could see. So our housing product that we're about to announce will be in the proximity of 150 to 165 mountain house style units. So we call those mountain house style units. It's a proven product that we've delivered at the base of the town of Blue Mountains. Over 211 have been occupied to date. A really special chalet style build type. We always use that as an example for our 3-story mid-rise project. And I think it's relevant in this particular case, considering the proximity to Horseshoe Valley. In addition to that, we think we can offer a 2-bedroom condo at a competitive and attainable price point. To announce that now would be premature. However, we're starting our preliminary designs in that regard. Greenhouse gases is another application component. Our communal septic solutions meet that criteria and could exceed minimum requirements. Climate risk, all environmental and stormwater approvals received to date meet and could exceed minimum requirements, as we're finding out daily. Another one, climate risk considerations include the following: regional stormwater solutions that we've already implemented on site and are operating currently, environmental protection buffers, net zero ready homes, construction materials, and strong engineering and construction principles that we'll execute on site. Next slide, please. Timeline to submit. We are currently in the February 24th to March 3rd slot. I have several meetings still till Friday to make sure that we're meeting those requirements, and we plan on meeting that deadline. March 3rd to the March 17th, it's address any outstanding comments and finalize the draft. We do target March 17th as a critical path item in our schedule to make sure we have everything we need. Part of that, to make it over the top, we will be asking local, federal, and provincial MPs and MPPs for letters of support. Adjacent municipalities that we worked with in the past, we have about 12 draft letters out there, and Mayor Greenlaw will probably be asking for your support as well. The last part of the schedule, March 17th, March 31st, Stantec and application team will upload the portal and submit. So we understand that they hit send on the 31st, and we're hearing some guidance from their contacts that we will find out some information near the summer in August, but a formal announcement of successful applicants will happen in September. So we'll find out then. Just a little more detail behind the support. So as George mentioned, that we do plan on submitting a draft plan to subdivision, but first we have to submit an OPA and zoning bylaw for what we now call Craighurst South. On the screen is our potential draft plan, block plan that we'll be submitting. Commercial, residential, a little more detail in the next slide. I do want to point out block 7. The large block on the east limits of the site, that is an archaeological avoid and protect lands. We have chosen to engage through our due diligence, through the ministry, to avoid and protect those lands. We see that as just an excellent opportunity to engage the Indigenous when we advance the application. There is a significant amount of artifacts that were found that led us to that decision to abandon developable area. I do wish to talk about that at a later date and engage the municipality on a right decision to engage the Indigenous. I think it's a really special piece, and we can use it as an educational center or trail or network as opposed to just fencing it off. So we'll get into that in a little further detail. Again, a big piece of our application, there's an Indigenous component checklist, about 6 or 7 questions related. We're going to fall behind that considering we did the right thing. We feel we did the right thing there. Next slide, please. This is a concept plan that shows the 168 mountain house style units, 3-story, 2-bedroom condo units. The range will be between 150 and 168. What's shown now is on 168. The commercial block that you see on your screen in pink will be subject to another announcement soon. So we wanted to block that off for now, but I can tell you there will be some more renderings and announcements soon as part of our OPA and zoning bylaw amendment process. Next slide, please. A schedule, I don't expect you to read that. I will narrow down to a key date as one of our partners in our agreement to that announcement. Our key date to execute and get everything ready for homes is July 31st, 2026. So that is a site plan agreement date for both the Mountain House project and the commercial project that allows us to start construction and advance building permits. So, there is potential, if everything goes well with a good market and success with the grant, ultimately to deliver homes in 2027. So we're excited to announce that. I believe that's it. I'd like to take this opportunity to answer any questions. If not, thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Beach. It's an exciting time for Craighurst. There's a lot of development there. It's going to, it's going to put it on the map. So, questions, Councillor Schell?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Greenlaw, through you to our guest speaker. Termination point for the sewage and the stormwater, where does it go?
Termination point, okay, so it's a communal septic bed for the wastewater treatment facility. So it goes to the 5 treatment beds, all of which have been approved by the ministry through an ECA process. It's just a matter of execution now. Now, the detailed design and the main piece of infrastructure to bring this on is a sewage pumping station that we'll call the Ambassador Pumping Station. We've currently submitted, and we're going through the ECA application process with your engineering staff now.
Perfect, thank you. That's on the sewage. What about the stormwater?
Stormwater has already been installed on Penetanguishene Road, a regional storm box culvert that surpasses 100-year storm to Hurricane Hazel levels, has been installed, operable, and functioning through our stormwater management pond.
Awesome, thank you.
Any other questions? Deputy Mayor Lavoie.
Yes, thank you very much. Excellent presentation. Looking very much forward to this completion. It'll be great for the community. I had one question. If we become the lead applicant, are there risk concerns of any nature?
Through you, Mayor Greenlaw, to Deputy Lavoie, as Mr. Vedaboncourt has outlined in the report, there'd be a number of agreements that we would need to undertake if Georgian was successful. And we would look at what those risks are and how those risks would be mitigated between the parties as part of those agreements.
Supplemental?
No, thank you very much.
Okay. So I guess a question would be, and it could be to either, Mr. Beach or staff. I know it sounds like a lot of money, but I'm sure there'll be a very big pool of applicants for this. So do you see what are the strengths of our application if it was to go through us versus the other applicants in that pool? Is there any boxes we're weak on getting the tick marks? Are we like?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to answer that. Being so close to the application process, we've been told we are a very eligible candidate. As far as I know, no one in Simcoe County is competing against us right now, considering the tight deadline from November to March. I've heard rumblings of a lot of interest in Township of Clearview and Town of Collingwood, but no real commitment. I am a board member of the GTDI, and I haven't heard much, although I meet with that group next week and I could find out more intel. I'd report back in that regard. I can tell you in the radius, we are a prime applicant. They've given us a very aggressive score that I don't want to meet, but or discuss today. However, a lot of optimism on our side.
Good. No, that's fantastic news. Any other councillors' questions for Mr. Beach or staff? Well, thank you very much for taking time in the great work you've done with our staff, and I also want to commend our staff on how you Georgian Developments and staff got together initially to lay out a path forward on how you're going to collaboratively work together, and I think that is the best way to have success. There's enough challenges out there in the world without having application processing a hindrance. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk, may we have a motion to receive?
Moved by Shell, seconded by Bard. Be it resolved that DS 2025-029, George Vedaboncourt, Manager, Planner, Special Projects, Georgian Communities proposed funding application under the Federal Government Canada Housing Infrastructure Fund be received and adopted. That the PowerPoint presentation presented by Jay Beach, Georgian Communities, be received. That Council formally endorse the Canada Housing Infrastructure funding application prepared by Georgian Communities with the assistance of township staff for infrastructure grant funding related to the development of the Craighurst community. And that Council approved the Township of Oro-Medonte being the lead applicant when filing the application, and that Council authorized staff to work with Georgian Communities in the submission of the application.
Thank you very much. Any questions regarding the motion? And I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? There are none. That is carried. Now we'll move on to item 11B. Mr. Vedaboncourt, this is regarding...
I'm going to excuse myself.
Yes,
Pardon me.
no, thank you very much, Councillor Schell. So, Mr. Vedaboncourt, if you just want to give Councillor Schell a time to...
Vacate the premises.
Go have a sandwich, right? Anyways, thank you very much, Councillor Schell.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Vedaboncourt, do you want to start off in this? And is Mr. Paul Dre and Associates visiting as well today, or are you doing this solo?
Thank you, Worship. Yes, I can speak to the report. Mr. Paul Dre and Ms. Karen Landry from Paul Dre and Associates are on the call. And Samantha White from Granicus is also on the call today, and they would be available to answer questions of members of council with respect to either the draft short-term rental accommodation, bed and breakfast establishment licensing bylaw, or the proposed contract with Granicus. So they're both on the call.
If IT can allow Mr. Dre and Ms. White forward. Thank you.
I'm sorry, just so I have the name right. Is it Wright or Dre? Wright or White?
White
Okay,
and Dre.
okay, thank you. Okay, so please.
Okay, thank you, Worship. So at the January 22nd, 2025 council meeting, council considered an options report with respect to how to deal with enforcement of illegal short-term rentals within the municipality. Council gave direction to prepare a draft licensing bylaw for consideration, and also to explore a contract with Granicus for enforcement assistance. Council also directed that staff engage with the public to get input on the draft bylaw. And so this afternoon, staff are back to council with a draft licensing bylaw for short-term rental accommodations and bed and breakfast establishments for the municipality. The intent today is to table the bylaw for public consultation, and staff have arranged for a public consultation meeting in person on March 24th at the banquet hall in the Oro-Medonte Community Center. And we've worked with corporate communications to establish a dedicated website with information about the draft licensing bylaw. And we're going to actively engage with the public with respect to comments on the draft. And Your Worship, I've already received a few comments, and we welcome the comments. So today is just to, as I said, to table the bylaw. The bylaw was prepared primarily by Ms. Landry and Mr. Dre, with the input of Curtis Shelswell, our manager of municipal law enforcement, and myself. So we've been working on this for the last several weeks, and what you have before you is the draft. Legal counsel has also reviewed the bylaw, so they've had their input as well. And so the bylaw before you today is ready for public input. The bylaw was developed on the basis of reviewing several bylaws. We had our bylaws from the 6 benchmark municipalities that were referred to in the January 25th report. And Ms. Laundrie, with her experience, also brought experience in terms of drafting similar licensing bylaws. So the bylaw that's before you today is a combination of input from those various sources. The highlights of the bylaw are on page 3 and 4 of the report, and I won't go through them in detail, but there are a few things that I think are important to point out. First of all, the draft bylaw recommends that only the principal residents be eligible to be licensed. So accessory dwellings are not eligible. So that's just a principle that has been established in the draft licensing bylaw. There's also a requirement that a responsible person be identified for the short-term rental accommodation that has the ability to be able to respond within 30 minutes of being contacted for any violations that are occurring, and be on site within an hour to address any issues. And thirdly, the draft prohibits advertising or operating a short-term rental accommodation or a bed and breakfast without a license. And it also requires that the applicant provide sewage system approval issued by the appropriate authority. So in the report, as I said, a number of the provisions are highlighted. Also included in the draft bylaw are the requirements in a lot of detail to obtain a license for a short-term rental accommodation, and the requirements to obtain a license for a bed and breakfast. Schedule D outlines proposed penalties under the town's newly adopted AMPS bylaw that range from $500 to $2,200 and $2,250 per occurrence for various infractions under the licensing bylaw, such as operating a short-term rental without a license or renting a room that is not approved as a guest room. The licensing fees are outlined in Schedule E, and the licensing fee was developed based on an estimate of 150 STRAs being licensed, and we did that as an initial projection. We are going to look at and gather input with respect to what we think might be some other options in terms of numbers, and that'll form part of our review when we come back to council after the public consultation period. There has been some talk, and we talked about the use of Section 440 of the Municipal Act, which is allows the municipality to seek an injunction to restrain an activity, and that has been included in the draft licensing bylaw as an option, and as indicated, it is an expensive option. So we want to use that tool when we have an opportunity for a good case in front of the court. The administration of municipal licensing, the administration of municipal licensing is done by municipal law enforcement, and so it is proposed that the short-term rental licensing accommodation fall under municipal law enforcement. And what is being proposed in the report is we contract the assistance of Granicus, a third-party company that can assist the municipality in terms of identifying STRAs and bed and breakfasts that are operating in the municipality that may be licensed, or more importantly, may not be licensed. And they have 7 modules that they offer clients. And in the report, it's recommended that the township engage a Granicus and purchase the following 3 modules: the address identification module, the compliance monitoring module, and the 24/7 hotline module. The cost of this service is a little over $13,000 plus HST. Staff are recommending that this be done as a single source purchasing action. And it has been acknowledged that Granicus is the leading provider of these services. And in fact, I think they are the only provider, but I'm not 100% sure. It's certainly cost effective to use their service, especially for the 24/7 hotline. And they are the experts in the field, being used by a number of municipalities in their enforcement actions. We talked a little bit about the administrative monetary penalty system. This is an important aspect of the enforcement tool, and that has been incorporated into the bylaw. So we have the ability to be able to levy a penalty for a violation of the bylaw, and I outlined a couple of those violations earlier. And there's significant dollar amounts attached to those penalties, and there are applicable to the owner of the property, and if the owner does not pay, that can be put on the taxes. So it's quite a process, and it's, as I said, it's been newly adopted by the municipality, and it's in place by a number of the benchmark municipalities that we reviewed earlier. Council has has deemed public engagement and input an important priority, and staff feels the same way, and certainly we're going to do everything that we can to try to get the word out through direct contact, through advertising, through various means about the draft licensing bylaw. And as I said, we have the formal public engagement forum on the 24th of March, and we will certainly promote that and get as much input as we can. And the intent is to return to council after that with any modifications and suggestions. Looking at the financial and legal implications, the draft budget and any budgets coming forward would be based on a break-even basis. So the intent is that this program would not cost the general taxpayers of Oro-Medonte. The cost of the program would be borne by the licensees. One aspect of the draft budget that's in the report that wasn't tabulated was any penalties that might be incurred through the AMPS program. That's hard to gauge, but in limited experience, we've seen from other jurisdictions that the AMPS penalty can be quite substantial in the first year, and then it starts to level off. So I would dare say, council, that it's going to take a couple of years if council adopts this to level out the budget from a revenue and expenditure standpoint. From a legal standpoint, we are aware that bylaws such as this have been challenged in the courts. The Township of Tiny had their licensing bylaw challenged, and we're expecting a decision by the courts imminently. We would want to review that decision prior to bringing our draft licensing bylaw back to council for consideration. There's been some other court cases as well that have arisen across other municipalities, but we want to ensure that if there's any takeaways from the most recent court decisions, that they're incorporated in our draft licensing bylaw. Your Worship, that concludes my presentation. If council adopts the recommendations in the report, we'll endeavor to get the draft licensing bylaw up and running on our website. Granicus is going to be meeting with our IT folks to begin the process for integration of their system with our property system, so that we have a seamless experience in terms of identifying properties. And the reason for the recommendation with respect to the contract is they need the lead time to be able to get up and running with respect to any of their municipal clients. So, Your Worship, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions, and as I said, we have our consultants on the line to assist as well. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Van der Moncourt. So at this time, I'm going to open up for questions. And we'll start with Councillor Young, then Councillor Hutchison.
Well, albeit Councillor Hutchison goes first, I have just some comments on the report.
Okay,
so,
sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Hutchison, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw, through you to Mr. Van der Moncourt. In the licensing bylaw, you have stated that it needs to be the principal residence of the owners, although I do note that in the V1 zone, we have Carriage Hills and Carriage Ridge Resort, and I would say the majority of those short-term rental units are not principal residents. So I'm just wondering how, and there's a significant number of them that do rent out as an Airbnb, so I'm just not sure how you would want to address that.
Thank you. And maybe I'll just ask Ms. Laundrie if she could speak to that, because we did talk about that during our preparation of our bylaw.
Ms. Laundrie?
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of council. With respect to the principal residence requirement, that does apply to the B&B classification for short-term rentals.
So I'm going to just maybe then, for clarification, I think that how we look at it is Carriage Hills is an R2 zone exception, I believe. Am I correct? And Copeland House is a V1 zone. So those are zoned as short-term rentals in which you don't need to be the principal operator, does not have to be on site, correct?
Yes,
Yes, that's correct.
Paul Dre. Yes, that's correct. There's an exception for those zoned areas where they're already operating.
Yeah. So it's almost like we put them in a separate parking lot. And
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
okay. Any other questions? Councillor Clark?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, can we get a little bit of granularity from the enforcement side of things? Because, you know, at first blush, if let's say we had 150 estimated licenses, it was the same amount for next year and we only renewed, there actually is a cost difference there between the estimated revenue and the estimated cost in a net negative position. And I also just have concerns with the enforcement amount. You know, if you have one officer enforcing potentially 150 licenses, that seems like there'd be a lot of time spent doing that.
Thank you for the question. I believe Curtis is on the line as well, and Curtis can respond. Thank you.
To Councillor Clark, it's very hard to answer this one, but I mean, if we have 150 licenses, we will have to have all staff on board. We do have a position that is vacant right now that we will bring into place once this bylaw does come into play. If it does, that will help. Administration side of it, we have backup for that already that will assist. And I mean, depending on how many license out of the 150, it's hard to tell how compliance will go the first year. Obviously, we will have to push social media and everything else to assist with getting the word out as fast as we can. But yeah, it's tough to answer that question, how compliance will go right off the hop here. I know, speaking from experience with towing, when that licensing bylaw came in, we had about a 6-month window where the bylaw was passed by council and it didn't come into force in effect until 6 months out from that passing, just to allow towing companies to get in compliance with the bylaw, get set up, and then we go out and do our inspections. So I think, I mean, we might be a couple months out once we pass this bylaw, if it gets passed, prior to implementing the requirements, just so that individuals in the B1 zone can comply with the bylaw. And I'm not sure if that answers it at all, Councillor Clark, sorry.
No, I appreciate that. I think there just is some thought, because we do have some licensing arrangements in communities that exist, and what did the municipal law enforcement costs look like for periods directly after, just so that we have the ability to build a forecasting plan that has some basis in data that we've seen from neighboring municipalities. But thank you very much, Curtis.
Deputy Mayor Lavoie?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the report. I'm going to just refer momentarily to page 3, and I think maybe there's a distinction to be made there that might be helpful, and I just want to clarify with staff and those online with regard to it. So short-term rental accommodations are specifically designated in the second paragraph at the top of page 3 to be those units within Horseshoe Resort condos and the Carriage Hills and Carriage Ridge developments. And whereas in the alternative, bed and breakfast uses are in the agricultural, rural, private recreational, and I presume residential zones where residentially zoned properties have received a zoning amendment to do so. Would that be an appropriate characterization of the categories?
Through you, your worship, to the deputy mayor, that's correct. Those are the only areas where legal short-term rentals, whether it's a traditional short-term rental or a bed and breakfast establishment, are permitted.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So that would mean, therefore, that bed and breakfast establishments being used as short-term rentals in the residential zones would have to go through a zoning amendment in order to qualify to get a license to operate.
Through you, your worship, to the deputy mayor, that would be correct. They, if they were operating as a bed and breakfast in a residential zone, they would need to get a zoning amendment.
Continue on, please.
And further to that, just to reinforce what Councillor Hutchison said earlier, that would therefore require that this be a principal residence, that the owner may or may not be attending at the time it's occupied.
So the general bed and breakfast definition in the zoning bylaw does not require the owner of the property to be in attendance. However, the exceptions that have been approved by councils in the past do require the owner to be there for bed and breakfast establishments.
Okay, thank you. However, in the bylaw, it does stipulate that the bed and breakfast establishment, I believe they've used the language from the official plan as opposed to our zoning bylaw. Would that be correct?
Not specifically the language, but the principles outlined in the official plan where the owner has to be on the property.
Okay. Is there a concern in the consistency of the language arising from the official plan and the zoning bylaw that needs to be incorporated into this? I'm not looking necessarily for an answer today. I'm just putting it forth as something to be contemplated vis-a-vis the ongoing discussion that will certainly arise with regard to this bylaw.
Through you, your worship, yes. So we'll take that under advisement and certainly address it as we move through this process.
And just to pick up on, okay, just some clarity to kind of put the bow on the deputy's comments. So that is based off of the prior OP or the new OP that is not, that's under appeal. So I'm wondering which OP are we referencing here, because the new sections of the new one are under appeal, so they're not enforceable. Because as a rule, and please educate me on this, my understanding is the bylaws are not written into the new OP until it overcomes any appeal, and then we write the bylaws in to match up with that OP at that time.
Mayor Greenlaw, if I may. So the official plan right now, there's, as you've noted, the majority of the plan is in effect. What would have to happen in order to bring the zoning bylaw document into conformity with the official plan? There would have to be an amendment to the zoning bylaws that sits right now to conform with the official plan policies that are in place. From the perspective of the bed and breakfast policy, it's my understanding the bed and breakfast policy is actually in effect as we stand right now. So what would have to happen is if, say, for example, the zoning bylaw was being updated to reflect the current policies that are in place, the official plan, it would have to be updated to be brought into conformity with that bed and breakfast policy, which speaks to the resident being on site for a bed and breakfast operation.
And under those conditions, that includes agricultural as well. They need to go through a zoning amendment now, which they didn't prior. Correct?
That is correct, sir. Yes.
Okay, thank you. My apologies. Continue on.
No, thank you very much. It's important to stress, I think this short-term rental language of the official plan is under appeal, but not the bed and breakfast language. Okay, I think That's all I had for the moment. Thank you very much for your indulgence, Mr. Mayor.
No, thank you. It's always a pleasure. I guess the couple of things I would is, what grounds are we exposed with to challenge the licensing bylaw? Like, what would cause that to be appealed? Because my understanding was licensing was not appealable.
Thank you, Worship. Perhaps I'll refer that question to Mr. Dre, who has had experience with those types of matters.
Please go ahead, Mr. Dre, when you're ready, please.
Yes, with regard to appeal of licensing bylaws, I'm not familiar with a lot of appeals to licensing bylaws. Zoning, yes, and land use, official plan, but licensing are kind of separate and apart from that, and don't fall back generally right to the zoning and or the official plan, because the licensing is a new licensing. There's no legal non-conforming use. It's something that's there. Any challenges to licensing usually are from, when I say this, it's usually like there's been appeals when the towing first went in and things like that, where companies were financially, affected by this. I've been involved in exotic animals, many licensing things that have come in, and I've not been involved in any appeals to those licensing bylaws. And usually if there is something that just sticks in somebody's craw, it's usually worked out prior to any court action to save both sides money.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Dre. Mr. Van Boncourt.
Thank you, Worship. And I had a look at the court challenge that's currently in process in Tiny Township, and there were sections of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms that were cited as being violated. There was they suggested that the municipality did not have the authority under the Municipal Act to pass the bylaw. So there was a whole list of different things that they cited, either under the Charter or the Municipal Act, where they felt that the municipality had exceeded its authority in terms of passing this licensing bylaw.
Okay, thank you. And I know another thing, because I think what we want to stress to the public is we're not going just down one road. We're taking a multi-forked approach to this hopefully solution. One will be licensing in the areas that they're already permitted in. The other is potential 440 prosecutions. Now, just because somebody has 4 cars in the driveway is not going to be where we're going to spend a lot of time and effort on a 440 prosecution we need to have substantive information or data. So have we got any better clarity today than we did a couple of months ago in regards to what the actual list would include that we would need to have for a successful prosecution?
Maybe I could speak to that, Mr. Radebonker. The difference in this bylaw than previous and even your current licensing bylaw is this would come under something called AMPs, administrative monetary penalties. The onus of proof in that particular is not beyond a reasonable doubt. It's on the balance of probabilities. So a couple things that are really important to keep in mind in this bylaw. One is you cannot advertise. And if you advertise without a license, then that's a violation. If you operate without a license, that's a violation. A little more difficult to prove, but it can be proven on the balance of probabilities. Even the neighbors coming forward could help with that on the balance of probabilities. But it's not the court system anymore. It's this administrative monetary system where somebody listens to all the evidence and says, wait a minute, no, he was advertising, whether it be on a platform, whether there's a big sign out in front of his place saying, short-term rental or rental for 2 weeks, or whatever, if you advertise, that creates the offense. So it's going to be a lot more, let me just backtrack. It's going to be easier for enforcement to deal with some of these things through advertising. And one of the things that's in the bylaw, if you actually look at, one is a deeming provision that if you do advertise, you're deemed to be operating it. So, it's some of those things are really important in this bylaw that, you couldn't really put in a regular licensing bylaw and get the enforcement through the court.
Okay. No. And
If I could
Mr.
just
Van
add to that.
Vandercourt, continue. Oh, sorry.
Oh, this is Samantha White calling. Samantha White from Granicus. Just to add to what Mr. Dre was just saying, in terms of looking at the information that's housed in the short-term rental compliance tool, we actually do take data capture from all of the platforms, the top 70 plus short-term rental platforms, on a weekly basis at different times of day. And we have worked with numerous communities across Ontario and across Canada. And one of the things that we have found with the implementation of the AMPS program is just having that consistent data capture. And as Mr. Dre was saying, to substantiate that advertising component means that you have operated a short-term rental does help for compliance and as well for enforcement purposes, because you do have a substantive amount of information that you would be collecting on a regular basis that does show that the person has operated the short-term rental. On top of that, we do have a timeline of activity, which goes back to the inception of host compliance, which was in 2015, back to when that short-term rental became active in the short-term rental marketplace. So above and beyond when Oro-Medonte actually signs up, we can actually see when that short-term rental was active in the marketplace, and that further gives more evidence that that person has been active as a short-term rental prior to the enactment of this legislation.
Okay, no, thank you very much. And Mr. Vandercourt, you.
Yes, Your Worship. I just wanted to speak a little bit further to your question, and certainly the licensing bylaw is drafted to license legal STRs and legal bed and breakfast. So if you're not legal, and that is you don't have the proper zoning for an STR or a bed and breakfast, then you're not eligible for a license. So that's the only businesses that are eligible for a license. And under the second part, Your Worship, is under the AMPS program, and you probably observed in looking at the schedule of penalties, they're quite significant. The initial offense, then the subsequent offense. But for some people, that may not be an effective deterrent. What the AMPS bylaw, the way the penalties have been drafted, is to function as a deterrent. And I think that Section 440 is a tool where the municipality can apply where an individual decides that they're just going to ignore the various enforcement activities of the municipality. They're just going to pay the AMPS fines because that's the cost of doing business. And you hear anecdotally of short-term rentals making $140,000, $150,000 a year. So having to pay a few thousand for an AMPS fines, maybe just the cost of doing business. So that's where, from a standpoint in terms of using Section 440, where you have a blatant disregard for your enforcement procedures, and you have good evidence, as Ms. White has indicated, then proceeding with the Section 440 may be the appropriate action.
Okay, no, thank you very much, and that makes sense. And then a question for Ms. White. The 24-hour hotline. So I know you give them so long to try and tone the noise down or the disruption, and then they got to be on site within another certain amount of time. If all those deterrents fail, do you have data showing that where you need to contact the police, or is that not part of the protocol?
So it actually is mapped to what Oro-Medonte would like to see happen. So if there's an escalation process that needs to be put in place, then that's what we actually map to. So it really is down to Oro-Medonte and the legislation that's created or drafted. That's basically the way that it would work is say as like a second pass, then if, the person hasn't attended, then they were to escalate to the police, then that would be how it would be mapped within the system itself.
Okay, and I just asked, would you have any data of municipalities that you monitor where how often you have to take it to that third level?
Off the top of my head, no, I don't have it to hand. I can go back and check. I think again, it would be like which subset of people have that as the next level of enforcement. But I can definitely check and get back to council.
No, I appreciate it. And like I know we will have the odd person that refuses to, oblige, and at the same time what we're here for is for the safety of our neighborhoods and communities as part of the main pillars of council's responsibility. So no, that's great. If you could just get that, I'd be interested to see if that is something we have to consider. But initially, I think we would go with the model that's been suggested. So thank you.
I think one of the things to flag as well is just the legislation does have sort of a 3 strikes and you're out component to it. So you would be levying fines if somebody isn't attending the property in the correct amount of time, which is what we usually see in many jurisdictions. But I can still go back and look to see, how many times somebody has to sort of escalate to the police as well.
Okay, no, thank you very much. Any other questions from members of council? Councillor Young?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Mr. Dre, or Mr. Valancourt, I read the penalty section there, but I can't recall, is there provision for increasing the penalties every time the owner is fined? And on that, is there in fact one? And I assume the adjudicator has some evidence before him or record that indicates they've been before him before. Is that correct?
I can speak to that, Mr. Vadabonker. I sit as a hearing officer in a number of municipalities, and yes, the hearing officer has that information. And what we've put in this particular bylaw, if you look, is an escalating penalty. So on the first one, this is, sort of the shot across the bow. The second one, and it escalates every time. But the hearing officer is aware of that when it comes to a hearing, and that's brought up when it comes to the penalty portion. There's no fines, of course, but a penalty portion of the hearing.
Perfect. And supplemental, Mr. Young.
Yeah, thank you. I guess at some point, Mr. Dre, that the license, whether they retain your license or not, kicks in under the AMPS. If they're continuing to pay the fine for the cost of doing business.
Yeah, we in the bylaw there is a demerit point system that we've developed, that other municipalities have, and we've developed it in this bylaw. So, for example, if you do not license and it's a second offense, then it can kick to, if you did have a license or going to apply, you would not be able to get one because of the escalation in that penalty.
Perfect. And one more supplemental.
Yeah,
maybe 2, but next one, please.
It's not a question, it's just a comment on the report itself. It's a very long report to read, but the process is well thought out. I've had a look at it, of course, and it makes sense. And it's thorough, it's comprehensive, And besides the fact that it's well-written, I don't think any of us expect anything else from staff here. It always has been the case, but what caught me in reading it was the words "in the public interest," and I think that's the real genesis for this bylaw corrected. And so that stood out to me on that. So it's just a good report, and again, it makes sense, and it's the process is well thought out. Everything's been addressed by the report in terms of me having read it. So,
Thank you very much for your comments, Councillor Young, Councillor Bard.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you, and somewhat to echo Councillor Young's comments. It looks good to us. It's very comprehensive. And I really like that there's the opportunity to have many eyes look at this over the next few weeks and then ask their questions and get input. One of the concerns that I had, and then you addressed it, was I said, well, to get 150 people to buy in, it would be nice to see some other scenarios of maybe like 100 or 50, and you've addressed that, so I appreciate that. So I guess one concern that I might have, because we're a lot of people have family cottages that they've had for 100 years in their family, and they might rent it out to a coworker or something, and that is part of the area. I believe with this system, that's not necessarily going to be penalized. It's more that if you're advertising, which is something that you wouldn't do to a coworker or a family friend. So I guess that's, can you confirm that it's really catching if you've advertised on this as the platform, and we're not getting rid of the renting out to family to help cover the cost that's been in your family for 100 years or so? Please.
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Bard. Yeah, so that's basically the decision of the OLT and the court was that there is a short-term rental accommodation that is rises to a threshold of being commercial accommodation because it's being advertised, and then there are those that are short-term rentals that are not commercial accommodation in the definition. And the court and the OLT said that that those benign short-term rentals are not the offending parties, and that they fell outside the definition of commercial accommodation. And so that's why the bylaw's been drafted in a way that the short-term rentals are rise to the threshold of a commercial accommodation as mentioned in the zoning bylaw if they advertise.
Thank you. So any further questions at this time? Seeing none, I'll call the motion, Madam Clerk. Thank you very much, Mr. Dre, Ms. White, and Ms. Landry. Oh, sorry, my apologies. Did you have another question, sir?
Yeah, I do. I'm just wondering whether it might be prudent to wait to hear for the Tiny decision. I mean, the decision of the Township of Tiny, or any other issues that might interfere, or in fact, to wait to see if we get an appeal against our own licensing bylaw before entering into any other ancillary contracts, because we could be tied up in court for another year or two.
Mr. Van Buncourt.
Thank you, through your worship, to the Deputy Mayor. The recommendation is that the bylaw be tabled today. Certainly, as I indicated in my presentation, township staff are very mindful of that court decision that should be coming down shortly, and we'll take that court decision and review it during the public consultation period before a bylaw comes back to council for consideration.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Any other, one more, just?
Yeah, I guess what I'm trying to stress is, as a matter of prudence, anything is appealable in law, on any grounds, whether they be the Charter of Rights or whatever. And I fully anticipate, given the litigious nature of this matter and the history of this matter, that we will get, it's a high probability that we will get an appeal. And I wouldn't necessarily want to be, have a township, in the position where it's contracted to, let's say, the Granicus contract specifically, while we're running through a series of appeals that could put us another year or two further down the road.
Yeah.
That's what I meant to say.
I think, you know, I'll let you answer it rather than me. But I would believe until the appeal period has lapsed and there is no appeal, we wouldn't enter into contracts until after that period, which is usually, is it 28 days or 30 days?
Your Worship, the recommendation is to enter into a contract with Granicus for a 1-year period. They need some lead time to prepare to get ready for implementation if and when council decides to implement the licensing bylaw. The bylaw is not an official bylaw until it gets adopted by council. So that bylaw, we had projected perhaps an April or May adoption date, but there's a lot of factors, and one of them is reviewing the Tiny Township court case. But if things proceed as per what we think, and that the court case comes in from Tiny, and we're able to consider those elements and make any changes to the bylaw would be back to council in that time frame. And so the jeopardy for the municipality is maximum of 1-year contract with Granicus, but we need that time in order to get the data up and running. It's a 1-year renewable.
Okay.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Lavoie, another question, please.
Yeah, can we split the motion so that we can vote on the draft bylaw and vote on the contract?
Can I ask a question to Ms. White, if you're still on? How much lead time would you need to accumulate the data for Oro-Medonte in order? And we're just trying to be respectful and responsible with taxpayer money, that we're not locked into something that if we get caught in the Court of Appeal, the first year could be a flush, and every dollar counts, and we want to be cognizant of that. That's all.
For sure. It's 8 to 12 weeks is the implementation time for address identification. So you are looking at about 2 to 3 months for the implementation. That looks at being able to match the MPAC data, getting the systems up and running and the technology, getting everybody trained on the system as well. You are looking at 2 to 3 months.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Deputy, do you have anything else you want to add to this at this point?
Well, I think I was proposing to split the vote.
Yeah, okay.
Other than that, no.
Okay, and Councillor Young, you had a question?
You mean, for clarity, split the motion? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Just
yes.
for the public listening. Thank you.
And Councillor Young?
Yeah, thank you. Just hearing the deputy, I agree with him that to split the vote. I don't understand the urgency, whether it's done by June or July or September. I don't think there's any real urgency to rush into something and regret it, perhaps.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, is there any other questions at this point? And Madam Clerk, you're going to, Councillor Bard.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor. So how much work has Granicus put into this so far, possibly?
At the moment, it is just us working with you. Like you haven't come in, you're not in a contract with us. So yeah, it really is down to when the time is right for Oro-Medonte and just making sure that we're set up once you guys have a bylaw in place. That's really what the key springboard was, is just because we do have a lead time, being cognizant that if we are too far into your bylaw. There will be a lead time that's there. Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, and CAO Benz.
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. We haven't had an opportunity to ask this of Granicus, but definitely understand the concern of council. And I wondered if there was an opportunity for staff to have a look at this and how we could potentially mitigate that. The recommendation was done in a way that we could have a program implemented for July. So deferring this may impact the ability to have the Granicus in place to be able to support that. I don't know what that picture would look like if we were to work with Granicus to build the program but not commit to the full implementation, but there may be that opportunity as well to have some discussion in terms of the cost to build the platform and then the full licensing at that point in time. But that, I think that would be staff's recommendation, that we pursue that with Granicus. What options are there to mitigate the potential of that financial risk if it doesn't go ahead? But it is a tool, I think, that's required, or we would certainly highly recommend to be able to enforce the program.
So are you, well, would it be potentially okay to say, okay, you know what, that component we defer to the next meeting, 2 weeks? Is 2 weeks will give us some time to so the one that we'll split the motion, the one we can defer for 2 weeks, and then we're voting on supporting to defer for 2 weeks the Granicus component, and we'll vote on the licensing component today. Is that fair? Okay, so don't want things running too smoothly.
Nope.
Gotta make sure that.
From my perspective, I can definitely take it back and speak with the team internally to see what we can do to mitigate risk as much as possible.
I appreciate that very much, Mrs. White. So we'll just give the clerk a chance to do-si-do those things for us.
Mr. Mayor, when you're ready, I am ready.
Okay, Madam Clerk, could you please read the motion, please?
Moved by Lavoie, seconded by Hutchison. Be it resolved that DS 2025-023, George Vadaboncourt, Manager, Planning, Special Projects, draft short-term rental accommodation and bed and breakfast establishments licensing bylaw be received and adopted. That Council table the revised draft short-term rental accommodation and bed and breakfast establishment licensing bylaw for public review and comment. That an information consultation session on the draft licensing bylaw be held on Monday, March 24th, 2025, and an engagement program be launched to receive public comments on the draft bylaw. That staff report back to council on the comments received through the community engagement program and recommended next steps.
Okay. Any questions of clarity on that motion? If not, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And could we have the second half of the motion, please?
Mr. Mayor, may I have a mover and a seconder?
Councillor Young and Councillor Clark.
Moved by, would it be more appropriate, since Councillor Lavoie has requested it, that we have him as the mover?
That's fine.
Okay. Moved by Lavoie, seconded by Young. Be it resolved that staff report back with respect to the one-year contract with Granicus.
Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Mr. Dre, Mrs. White, Miss Landry, I hope I got the names right. Thank you very much for attending and helping us through this, and we look forward to talking in the near future.
Thank you, and I think we're involved in the open house on the 24th, so we'll look forward to seeing councillors in person on that particular day. Thank you.
Hopefully we have a lot less snow then.
For sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Yep, please. You can bring Councillor Shell back in, and then I'll wait until everyone's back. Did you want a break before your big motion? Yeah.
Not yet.
No. Okay, so, sorry. There you go. Thanks, Councillor Shell. We're now on item 11C, which is the council composition and ward boundary review. Madam Clerk, would you like to say anything before we open the table for discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe my report speaks for itself, but I'm happy to answer any questions or
Thank you very
comments.
much. Yeah, that's right. So the one thing I would like to start off by just saying is we're looking at the ward boundary division as, because the way we're set up now, the workload for a deputy mayor is council duties, ward duties, and the deputy mayor and the township duties, which is very heavy and loaded. There's some things at play with county right now as to the composition of whether they go to 16 councillors versus 32. And that's not solidified yet, and it will likely be at least another month before we get clarity as the direction they're going. The other thing we need to look at, so one is I'm suggesting we defer this for 2 months till we see what rolls out of county. I also think we need to take into consideration, we don't know what's happening with the annexation components from Aurelia and Barrie. And we want to see how this is rolled up, and so that we can make the right decision if we realign. You know, the options are to go back to 5 wards or remain at 6. But at the end of the day, I think it's important that the deputy mayor position is a position that is elected by the entire electorate of the township, and it's not appointed from council. And we've been through those reasons before, that if the mayor doesn't fulfill the term, then it's somebody that the entire township has voted for that position. There are ways around that if we do stay with 6, but I think first we want to see what happens with county and what happens with the ward boundary adjustments before we take on this exercise. And I think the recommendations from the consultants we used last term there's enough options there that we don't need to go back to a consultant and incur another $55,000 in costs. So that's where I just want to open up with that, and then open the floor. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My only comments to add, or just to echo your final comments there, I think from a democratic point of view, the deputy mayor has the potential to, under generally unfortunate circumstances, to lead the township, and the people should have the opportunity to select who that is directly and not through an appointment of within council. So,
thank you. Councillor Shell.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. I think that's good common sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, when I was campaigning, that was a question that was asked by a lot of constituents. Why isn't there a separate vote for a mayor on that? I read the report. The only thing not concerns me, but stood out to me is this splitting it 2 years and 2 years, is that necessary?
No.
I understand, but I mean, there's a lot to learn, I assume, and for somebody to come in new, I don't see, personally, I don't see any need for it. It's always been the full term.
No, and I concur, you know, hindsight is 20/20. We could have done it a different way and said, you know, one person's in for 2 years, now I'll put up for 2. The intent of how we split it was to give multiple people an opportunity to have that experience that would help with the progression through time as mayors ride into the sunset or end up buried somewhere. But you know, hopefully for natural causes. But anyways, Councillor Hutchison.
Thank you, Mayor Greenlaw, and through you to Councillor Young. I think we have to remember that this decision was not ours. We were faced with how to manage it once we got into this chamber, and we felt at the time that that was the best solution, given what we were given. And I think the fact that this year I did have a number of conversations with yourself and with the deputy mayor and who was going to anticipate that we were going to have an annexation issue in front of us. And for that very reason, I felt it wasn't proper for me to step in midterm because of the momentum that you and the deputy mayor have had and a number of, closed conversations with parties. And so I do think it sort of speaks to the downside of splitting it half and half. Although I think the spirit of the decision was correct. I think, as time spooled out, we saw that probably just wasn't the best way to manage this current council at this time. So I agree. I believe it should be an elected position and not one that is selected by council.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, Deputy Mayor Lavoie and then Councillor Young.
Yeah, thank you very much. I notwithstanding whatever the workload may or may not be and the circumstances that arise in a particular cycle of council, I do think there are a couple of fundamental governance flaws in this manner of constituting a council. One, Councillor Clark has mentioned, and it's been mentioned elsewhere, is that the deputy is not elected at large, so that's a problem, and not selected by the general public, as the case may be, and could end up in a position where they take over the township. And I don't think that's appropriate, particularly for municipal elections that typically don't get more than 35 to 40%. And so you're having 35 to 40% of one of 6 wards electing potentially a mayor. The other one that occurs to me is that, in my case at least, and it would apply if any other one of us were the deputy, is the principle of equal representation by a governing body. And I would have to say that the members of Ward 4 are quite underrepresented because of the additional work that's required in being deputy mayor and being a county councillor. So and there have been a number of large issues that have been across the township, which have required a lot of my attention and would have required anybody else's attention. So, but I do think the principle of equal representation is one that ought to be given a considerable amount of thought in how we constitute the next council. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Lavoie and Councillor Young.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. No disrespect was meant to Councillor Hutchison that she couldn't learn within a year, but as happened prior to this, It was, I know you are. I know I sit beside you and I know how smart you are. No, it was a continuum, as had been mentioned before, what is going on. There's some major things going on. So that's all I meant.
Anyways, okay. Any other questions or comments? If not, then I'll ask the motion, Madam Clerk.
So for clarity, Mr. Mayor, you are requesting that the matter be deferred
For 2 months.
for 2 months until a county council.
Yeah,
Okay.
and hopefully we hope between the Barrie Aurelia potential annex, well, the boundary adjustments suggested by our neighboring municipalities, hopefully we'll have a clearer path where we're going there, and we'll have a better understanding of the direction of county council.
Okay. Moved by Bard, seconded by Clark. Be it resolved at CS 2025-02, Yvonne Aubuchon, Clerk, Council Composition and Ward Boundary Review be received. That report CS 2025-02 be deferred pending the result of the County Council Composition Review, and that subsequent to the County Council Composition Review, staff report back at the April 23rd, 2025 Council meeting.
Thank you. Okay, you've heard the motion. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Reports of municipal officers for information only. Item 12A, B and C. Madam Clerk, do we have the motion?
Moved by Shell, seconded by Lavoie. Be it resolved that the reports as listed under item number 12, reports of municipal officers for information only, be received.
Okay, there's no questions or concerns from any of those reports. It's all fairly straightforward. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? There are none, and that is carried. Reports and announcements of members of council. Is there any from our partnerships and the county council? So I'll start. Do you want to? Councillor Shell, do you want to, did you have that? I wasn't sure if you were just moving the card or you're asking to speak.
No, I would like to speak, but I'll take my turn.
No, we can, like if it's okay, we'll start with you. We'll just go right around the table. Is that okay?
That's a good idea. We'll start at this end of the table. Thank you very much, Mayor Greenlaw, through you to the rest of council and the public. A news release, a media release from Nottawasaga Valley Conservation Authority. I'm just going to read a couple of lines out of it here. It's a full page. In the last few years, NVCA has made changes to our operations to improve efficiency and permit review timelines. The e-permitting platform can be accessed on NVCA's website to help assist you. The idea is to save time and money. NVCA has advised property owners to book a pre-consultation with NVCA's regulations and planning staff before submitting. And the property owners are encouraged to use the e-permitting platform. I'm reading it double. The e-permitting platform to submit inquiries about their property or proposed development, book consultation, and submit permit applications for a more streamlined experience.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Councillor Shell. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to my colleagues around the table and the general public. We had a great traffic safety committee meeting last Thursday night, and we're working on a number of different initiatives that will help us make the correct decisions in terms of community safety zones, targeted enforcement, the use or not use of automated speed enforcement cameras, and the associated risks and or opportunities that exist when using those systems. Obviously, the legislation that allowed those to occur is still quite new, and there is some gray areas in terms of how the municipality can make sure we're putting ourselves in the best position for our residents and the municipality at large. But I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows we're still working on it and making sure that we're doing things right the first time and not jumping the gun, so to speak, and making mistakes that are costly to everyone.
Yeah. No, and just to add to the one thing that I thought was very amazing that the team brought forward is the flow of traffic on our county roads compared to city streets in Barrie. and there's a substantial difference. So it's at what point are we covering our cost and making revenue, right? So although not taken out of consideration is safety is our number one mandate when it comes to that and speed. So anyways, Councillor Bard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Forgive me if I'm going to read this, but this is for the Orillia Public Library, and they just received the Minister of Tourism, Culture and Gaming's award for innovation for their Human Services Coordinator. And the award recognizes successful new approaches that demonstrate a positive impact in the community and are of continued value to public libraries. And I just, to familiarize some of you with this position, they created this coordinator role to provide person-centric social supports and community navigation services to vulnerable library patrons and staff. And the coordinator collaborates with local service providers to deliver on-site programming, creating a communal space for organizational partners to reach shared clientele. And they provide support to library staff through education, de-escalation, and debriefing. This has improved staff wellness, increased library safety, and reduced police intervention. So the Orillia Public Library took an approach different from having a security guard to providing these supports, and they're sort of a model for other libraries around the province. So we're very proud of that position and the success, and grateful for the award.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bard. Deputy Mayor Lavoie? Okay. It's a first. You want to make note of that, Madam Clerk? Councillor Hutchison.
Yes, thank you. I do have a news release from the Severn Sound Environmental Association that nominations are now open for their SSEA Champion Awards, and nominations are invited from across the watershed to recognize individuals, organizations, and groups who make a positive impact on the health of our environment. And a quote from the Executive Director, Julie Cayley: "These awards celebrate the passion and dedication of people in our communities going above and beyond to protect the health of the Severn Sound watershed." So the nomination forms are available on the SSCA website, and the deadline for nominations is the 14th of March. Thanks.
Okay. Councillor Young.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I just want to, for those unaware of it, up in the Moonstone area, there's a 68 house proposed residential subdivision coming in, or at least it's proposed at this time. It hasn't come before council. It's on or just off of the 8th line south of Moonstone Road. There's going to be a public meeting on it. It'll be at the Coldwater Legion, which is just off of 2 Michael Avenue. And this will be on Tuesday, March, make sure I'm right here, 4th, Tuesday, March 4th, and at the Coldwater Legion. And Catherine McCarroll, who is the senior planner there in charge of the project, has agreed to field calls from residents who have inquiries about it. So, and she'll be at, or is at 705-487-2171. extension 2105. So that's forthcoming, like I said, and it's going to be a 68 unit project. So
thank you very much, Councillor Young. Just a couple quick other things to clean up. This Saturday from 11 to 1 p.m. is the Chili Lunch Social to support Rugby Hall. And that's at 1911 Old Barry Road East. So it's basically Old Barry Road in line 12, right? Yeah. And also, I just want to remind everybody, on March 11th, County Council will be having a public meeting regarding the composition of council. So it's a good chance to come out and give your input and feedback into that as part of the decision-making process. Okay, so that's it. There's no other announcements at this time. I will We'll move on to 13B. Madam Clerk, do you need a break before 13B? Are you? It's a bit of a long motion.
I shall persevere.
But so what I'll do, before you read the motion, Deputy Mayor, would you like to provide comments regarding to the motion on the table?
Yes, I will do that. In advance of that, I'll apologize to the clerk for the length of the motion, and I will put my payment into the little cup that I received for extensively worded motions. Having said that, I couldn't do better than Ms. Voorhees in describing the circumstances that have given rise to this motion. And I think, speaking from a person whose responsibility is to represent this community, I find that there isn't enough opportunity for the parties who are elected to represent the four communities to have open and transparent discussions amongst one another with regard to what the needs may or may not be with regard to the land request, I'll call it, from the City of Barrie. We did have one meeting where all political members were present. That's just one meeting. And I make no blame here. I just find that the process will not lead us to a place where any of us will be satisfied. We don't have a cost structure. We can't agree to what the basic findings are of the experts, the planning experts, and we can't agree to take anything off the table once there's an acknowledgement by planning experts that something isn't needed. Therefore, we can't progress. And I say this as a representative of one of the four communities. But I don't say this entirely alone. There are conversations that take place informally, as is the nature of human relations otherwise. And there is general frustration with the way things are moving. So the purpose of this motion is to cause the four councils to pass or defeat similar motions in their own councils to determine or publicly state whether or not they want to engage in a public process that permits the residents of the communities. And I don't represent the residents of Barrie, but we do know that a significant number of them signed a petition and have a keen interest in the outcome. And they would probably like a say. So I offer this motion to this council and the other three councils for consideration and their own motions for a vote to establish whether or not they want to engage in a different kind of public negotiations where we can consider the issues and deal with the issues in a sequential manner, not unlike the way an OLT hearing would be conducted. So the procedures are well known. They have foundations in other areas, but it would be more of a direct negotiations involving the elected representatives who sit on the councils who would come forth to meet. And it would begin, once it began, it would have a 6-month course, and we would take whatever agreements or disagreements we would have and then submit those to the province to make their final decision, but at least there would be some foundation for agreement, and where there wasn't agreement, some foundation to represent what each party felt were the issues and to rebut the issues of the other parties. And I think at least that way, not only us, but the province would have some level of procedural fairness by which we came to a conclusion to this matter. So with that, I'll let the clerk read the motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor Loff, for the great explanation. So, Madam Clerk, if you can, and if you need to take a break, just put your hand up and we can, okay? Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I have moved by Lavoie and seconded by Clark. Are we okay with that? Thank you. Moved by Lavoie, seconded by Clark. Whereas there are parties participating in ongoing provincially facilitated municipal boundary adjustment discussions that are in response to a request for lands by the City of Barrie, the request. And whereas the municipal parties are the County of Simcoe, the City of Barrie, the Township of Springwater, and the Township of Oro-Medonte. And whereas Hempson was jointly retained by the parties to evaluate the need for additional residential and employment lands at the boundaries of the Barrie, Springwater, and Barrie, Oro-Medonte. Hempson has completed this task and produced a report, the Hempson Report. And whereas there has only been one meeting to date involving all parties. And whereas the facilitation process is significantly, approximately 60% over budget due to higher than anticipated consultation costs. And whereas the parties are unable to agree on the basic outcomes and findings of the Hempson Report on the land needed requirements of the municipal parties. And whereas there has been no meaningful agreement between the parties, in particular for the need and base growth assumptions that justified the City of Barrie's request. And whereas the parties should determine the terms of reference amongst themselves, and whereas each stage or phase of the City of Barrie request involving inclusion of additional lands and conducting its own internal analysis outside of the facilitation process. And whereas it has been determined that the region requires more housing of all varieties to meet expected demand. And whereas it has been determined that additional employment lands are not required during the planning period. And whereas when parts of the City of Barrie requests are found to have no professional planning jurisdiction, they continue to form part of the facilitation due to a lack of agreement and vision between the parties. And whereas based on the initial request, there has not been a full professional planning analysis of the options to address the need for additional housing, including the need to annex lands for any purpose. And whereas there is no set commencement or conclusion or procedure to the facilitation process. And whereas there is a provincial mandate to build more homes faster. And whereas the province has indicated that it prefers a local solution to municipal matters. And whereas there appears to be a willingness to enter into negotiations to explore ways to assist the province in its mandate and to simultaneously benefit the county's regional development objectives. Now, therefore, be it known that the Township of Oro-Medonte supports the provincial mandate, and that Council is willing henceforth to participate in ongoing discussions, regardless of the constitution of those discussions, with the parties to enable outcomes of mutual benefit and aligned with the provincial mandate to build more homes faster and to protect and expand jobs amidst a rapidly changing geopolitical environment. Be it resolved that in order to expedite an economical, mutually satisfactory outcome, the Council of the Township of Oro-Medonte recommends that all further discussions be held in open session, and that all parties being present at each session. And further, that as an alternative to the present manner of facilitation, all parties enter into discussions in the sessions in the manner described in the appended process, as amended to their mutual agreement. And further, that once carried, this motion be delivered immediately to the parties requesting a decision as to whether they agree to such a format. And further, that if this motion is approved at Municipal Council, it is to be delivered to the parties and the Provincial Land Development Facilitator and the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing. And further, that this draft process be considered by the parties in the establishment of a revised terms of reference. And further, that notwithstanding anything otherwise agreed to regarding the process, that from the time of the commencement of the sessions, not more than 6 months shall transpire. The process is attached as Appendix A, the process.
Thank you very much, Madam Clerk. Are the appendices, did you want to read that? You don't, like, the appendix is there, kind of given a path. Do you want it? It's up to you if you want to read it or not, or people can look it up online.
I am happy to oblige council if they wish the appendices.
You know what? You have a wonderful voice. Please proceed.
That's the Newfie accent. Thank you. Appendix A, the process. The sessions be constituted in the following format: that all parties be present at all sessions, that the sessions be live streamed, that the sessions be mediated, facilitated by the same facilitator who shall act as the chair of the sessions, that support services including record keeping be provided by the county, that the sessions have an agenda, that the sessions provide opportunity to public input through observance of meetings, deputations and presentations as the public wills, that the sessions each be not less than 1 day in length, that the parties be able to speak out for caucus purposes during the session in private, breakout for caucus purposes during the session in private, that there be no more than 1 week between the sessions unless otherwise unanimously agreed to, that the parties present an initial issues list, that the parties progress through the issues one by one until an agreement is reached. Agreement on any issue will be by vote. Each party will have 2 votes to be made by an elected official of the municipality of that official's proxy. That the sessions take no more than 6 months as calculated from the date of the first of them. That should the parties reach or not reach agreement, then they shall, if together in agreement, the agreement then document it and present it to the facilitator mediator within a month of the conclusion of the sessions. Instruct the facilitator mediator to present the agreement to the minister for disposal of the matter at the minister's discretion, having consideration for the agreement. If not in agreement, then each party shall document arguments with reasons and evidence for their position using only materials from the sessions. The submissions. Complete the submissions within 1 month of unsuccessful conclusion of the sessions. Present the submissions to the facilitator / mediator. Thereafter, the submissions will be distributed by the facilitator mediator to all parties as soon as it is reasonably practical. Thereafter, they will so choose, each party may document a rebuttal to any or all of the submissions and present their rebuttals to the facilitator mediator within 1 month of the distribution of the submissions. The facilitator mediator shall take the submissions and rebuttals to the minister for disposal of the matter at the minister's discretion, having consideration for the submissions and the rebuttals. Finally, that the above noted process take no longer than 6 months.
Thank you very much for that. It's like War and Peace, but you know what? I think it's a very important motion and it's very detailed. The great thing, and I know Deputy Mayor Lavoie spent a lot of time on this, and I want to thank him for that, is that he provides a path forward and he sets a timeline, and that's what we need in order to know where we're at now and where we got to get to, and this aligns with what I believe Mayor Nuttall said. He didn't want to get involved in a never never agreement. So this aligns to what Barry has requested as well. I think the important thing moving forward is we need to remove the lands that are not factually needed. And the Hempson report laid that out. And by doing that, I think it would speed up the process and reduce the cost, because now we're focused on what the real need seems to be, and that's a housing shortage, which aligns with the government's #1 mandate. I think it's also important that we take these discussions of the facilitation, and when we get into mediation, we may go back into closed, but while we're facilitating and defining the needs, I think it needs to be in the public, in the spirit of transparency. And so at the end of the day, we need to focus on the real needs and work with all levels of government to get this decided on and put to bed without wasting time and taxpayers' money. And the one thing I do want to point out is this motion only pertains to the request in the facilitation of Barrie, Oro-Medonte, and Springwater. We have a similar request going on with our neighbors to the north with Orillia, but that has followed an MCR process that has taken them a number of years to get to where they are, but they've truly identified and shrunk their land request down significantly, and that process has been very transparent. It's included a number of public meetings where input's taken from the public, and they've been very, very good to work with. Not saying Barrie is not great to work with, just the approach and the lack of structure makes the experience very different and difficult to come to an amicable solution. So if there's any other comments, please feel to weigh in. Councillor Bard.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, through you to the deputy. There's a lot there. I guess trying to get into some of the details, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this clearly. There's going to be one of these sessions every week, possibly for 6 months, and yeah.
Unless otherwise agreed to. There's a definite urgency, I believe, and I think the parties need to respect one another's positions, and the parties need to be able to respond. And what's not happening right now is that there's a pace to the facilitation because of the nature of facilitation that I think we need to pick up. It might be we might find we only need to meet once a month, but if we can agree to that, that's fine. It's for the purposes of negotiations and development of that terms of reference between the parties.
And I'm being optimistic. We may only need to meet twice for 2 full days, and we may have a resolution. So, but what we're saying is we're not going to meet to have a coffee and a couple of donuts and then break for the day, and we'll reconvene in like a month. That doesn't work. We need to pick up the pace. We need to roll up our sleeves collectively as 4 parties with the facilitator and find a solution now, because we can't build homes until there's a solution in place. Councillor Bard, supplemental.
I get the urgency, but then can we get rid of the 6 months and make it 2 months or something to try? This just seems like it's going to be a lot of time on not only your part but staff's part and staff. And is the facilitator then somebody within our group, or is this somebody that we're hiring? So I'm just thinking of costs as well, not only like direct costs, but staff costs from them not being able to do other work. So either less meetings or the shorter time frame, I might be happier with that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I think what's proposed in the motion is if we're hoping to get it done within 6 months, we need to meet as often as possible to get to the finish line. The facilitator is being provided by the province, so there is no cost to that component. But, you know, let's be honest with one another. Everything that all governments do come from the taxpayers, so nothing is picked up by somebody other than the end user, and that's everybody. So.
Yeah, if I might add to that, I mean, the facilitator is appointed by the minister. So to that extent, I think the facilitator is acting, you know, as a conduit for communication to the minister, so that if there is a breakdown, the minister at least has some understanding of what transpired and can make some decision on trusted evidence or a trusted relationship. I think my belief, and you know, the province would have to speak for itself on this, I think they would still want to maintain that contact. So what this is suggesting, and otherwise the facilitator and the province would have to agree, is that the facilitator be the chair for these sessions. You know, and all parties would have to be available. And I've gone through lots of arbitrations, and oftentimes the timelines get stretched because people's schedules don't permit, as you've noted. But I will work that out. I mean, I think Barry, quite frankly, and the rest of us have indicated, you know, that we want to get this dealt with, so it's not hanging over us forever, hanging over the residents forever. And to that end, we also, the developers will know what the status of the land is and what they can come in and offer on those lands by way of assisting with more diverse housing options and that sort of thing. So we'll see how it goes. I mean, it's an attempt, right?
Councillor Shaw.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Greenlaw. Through you to the Deputy Mayor, is this, are these negotiations, are these meetings to be held at our level, or sorry, at our township and Barrie Township and Springwater, or are they going to be held at the county?
That's a great question. I suppose whoever has the best facility to do that at, Springwater has a pretty good chamber, a little more suitable, I think, for that than this one. Certainly counties is very good as well and has excellent streaming capacity, because the cameras do all kinds of automatic things like zoom in on the speaker. So I think, you know, that might be a useful area to do it, and it's somewhat local to the parties, and I'm certain Barry's chambers can accommodate this as well. Timing and availability.
Supplemental?
Yes, thanks. That's my thought too. County might be the better. That way it's more central, and it'll accommodate everybody in each of the communities that are involved. So, I mean, for Springwater to come all the way up here, for us to go all the way down there, we're meeting in the middle. That was my thought. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Councillor Young.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I want to compliment Deputy Mayor Lavoie on avoiding the use of big words that only he understands. It requires a dictionary to understand, and sometimes I think he makes the words up. But anyways.
Yeah, point noted. So, okay, so if there's no other questions, you know, I would, I'll call the vote. Well, yeah, well, you know, I wouldn't do that to you, Yvonne. You, anyways, I'll call the vote. All in favor? That is carried, and you can mark that unanimous, Madam Clerk. And so we're now on item 14, the consent agenda. Does anyone need anything pulled from the consent agenda? Councillor Clark?
I think further to Mr. Crawford's comments from the open session, it may be wise to pull 14D.
Okay. Okay. So, and I'm going to think it's in order that so we could pass a motion from 14D to give staff direction to start work on, this year is in the process now, but for 2026 on a different strategy. Please, you go ahead. You speak better than me.
No, precisely, Mr. Mayor. I think it warrants opportunity for us to give staff time to research and identify other methods that may be more equitable, as Mr. Crawford had stated, in terms of who is eligible or receives the awards during this election process. So precisely.
So now, do you want a second, Madam Clerk, just to do a motion, or look at, see, that was quick. A lot quicker than the last assignment you had, right? That was a lot quicker than the last assignment you were given to read that motion. So please give the motion.
Moved by Young, seconded by Bard. Be it resolved that the staff recommendations with respect to the items listed under consent agenda correspondence be adopted as printed, with the exception of item 14D, which shall be pulled to be voted on separately.
Okay. All in favor? Opposed? That is carried. And can we have a motion to receive the rest of the items on the consent agenda?
Moved by Clark, seconded by Hutchison. Be it resolved that item 14D be received and that staff be directed to report back to council with options regarding the Citizen Senior of the Year nomination and award process for 2026 and onward.
Thank you very much. All in favor? That is carried. And did we do the motion for all the rest of consent agenda items? That was it, right? So the first meeting, I was sitting there, you reversed it. Thank you, that's fine. My bad. Okay, so 15 is communication petitions. We have none. We have no notice of motions, no bylaws, and no closed session items. So can we have a motion for the confirmation bylaw?
Moved by Hutchison, seconded by Shell. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2025-022, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held on Wednesday, February 26, 2025, be read a first, second, and third time, passed, being grossed by the clerk, signed and sealed by the mayor.
All in favor? That is carried. And may we have a motion to adjourn, please?
Moved by Clark, seconded by Lavoie. Be it resolved that we do now adjourn at 5:31 p.m.
All in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have yourself a great week. And thank you, council. That was a great